Hi, everyone. Good morning. First of all, I want to start. Thank you so much for the invitation for being today at the Data Fest Festival. I'm very glad. And I'm also very glad today to have the chance to present to you some ideas related to data visualization and data activism. So this presentation is entitled Data-Driven Alternative Narratives for Activism, an open source and hacker ethos approach to data visualization. I just want to spend some minutes to introduce myself. I am coming from Chile in South America, but in the last 8 years I'm based in Milan, where I did my PhD, and I have the chance to do my research within the Density Design Research Lab, which is a group inside the design department at Politecnico di Milano, where we do a lot of research and exploration related to data visualization and how data visualization is a tool for research. Also, nowadays, I'm teaching at the Politecnico in this course that we call Mediazioni algoritmiche, algorithmic mediations, where we teach to master degree students in communication design to approach data in a critical way. So we try to explore with our students critical ways for working with data, and not necessarily only related to data visualization, but also related to data set design, protocols, and different tools for making sense about data. I'm also part of a political collective in Milan, which is called Off Topic. Today I will show you one of the projects that we are doing at Off Topic Lab. So we are a group of activists that we mainly do research from bottom-up research, trying to inquire different mechanisms and things that are happening in the city of Milan. So our approach is very critical on topics related to urbanism and politics in the city, also being very critical to some concepts such as smart cities and how private data is being used in order to provide business models that are covering the city. In the last years, I also work as a freelance with a non-profit organization which is called Equipo Argentino de Antropología Forense. This is a huge organization that is based mainly in New York and Mexico, but it's working in moreover than 60 countries around the world. I'm also interested to introduce this part of what I am doing right now, because as a freelance, I have the chance to not only teach and do research related to data visualization and activism, but also put it on practice on collaborations with this organization. So first of all, I want to invite you to read this concept, which is data activism, which is a type of activism that takes a critical approach to practices around data and technologies, such as extraction, collection, analysis, communication, among many other parts of the process of working with data. But at the same time, having this critical approach to practices around data and technologies come along with the idea to challenge existing power relations. And I'd like to introduce this concept because data activism has this critical approach not only in data per se, but also in all of the practices around it that are around data. So today we can say that data activism found some things, some characteristics that make it very, very relevant today. For example, nowadays you don't have to be an expert for start dealing with data and for start manipulating it. So the barriers, the gap between the experts and the non-experts make possible that many people, many hackers and many activists put their knowledge together in order to start performing with data, taking data in their hands. Other characteristics of data activism nowadays is that there is still a lack of data literacy among individuals, even though we are in this datafied society where we are surrounded by data every time, everywhere. there's still a lack of data literacy. That means to understand and to work with data, to be critical about what data is and what data can represent. Finally, another characteristic of data activism is that all of the activists and people that are working on bringing experiences of data closer to issues related to activism are called data intermediaries. So designers working with data visualization, for example, or hackers that are coding and are scraping information for liberating data are different ways, different practices for bringing data closer to the experiences of people, for understanding what is data, and in that way trying to make the gap less, bigger, related to data literacy. So if we think about data activism as a critical approach to data and the practices around data, we can think that data visualization is a tool for data activism. But what I want to present in this presentation is that if data visualization is a tool for data activism, that means that data visualization needs to follow the open source and hacker ethos. That is precisely what data activism follows. So I will explain this concept during this presentation. I want to also tell you that during my PhD, I did research related to how is data visualization happening in the world of data activism. So my research is entitled Disclose to Tell, a data design framework for alternative narratives. And one very important part of my research was related to see how, or which is the role of data visualization nowadays in data activism. So from this, I bring two main ideas. First of all is that data visualization is a tool of the conflict, since data visualization is actually representing different conflicts. But at the same time, data visualization is a tool for the conflict, because it not only represents an image of a conflict, but the main idea is that data visualization is intended to make you think, to reflect, to be critical about how that conflict exists and how this conflict could be perpetuated. So it's a tool for the conflict that promotes critical questioning of the causes and agents of the conflict. So for doing this, for trying to see what was happening related to data visualization and data activism, I went through a collection of many cases. I collect more than 118 projects that were digital projects using data visualization on topics related to data activism. So these projects, they are mainly ones that are exposing a narrative that is not reported by authorities. They are bottom-up and counter-narratives mainly that are exposing alternatives to the official version that seek to change something, seek the social change. And this is mainly the work of NGOs, activists, data journalists, independent data journalists actually, that are involved in topics related to human rights and other topics. So from this big collection of cases, then I realized that not all of these cases, just because they were touching topics related to human rights, were data visualization for activism projects. So I create this sort of criteria that is very based on the theory of Chantal Mouffe, the agonistic theory, where there are three pillars. If a project answers to revelation, dissensus, and contestation, that means that that project was part of my analysis. Leaving out other projects that were incredible, they were really well done, and they were also following many of the key aspects that we might think data activism follow. But many projects related to data journalism, digital humanitarianism, digital social tools, or urban and social transformation projects, I left them out, since their main goal was not to tell a different story, but they were trying to pursue other ways of social change. So the result, this is not the result, the final output of my thesis, but I decided to publish all of these cases that I found out that corresponds to data visualizations for alternative narratives. And I published all of these cases in a website, in an archive, which is Alternative Narratives Visualization Archive. And the archive is really very simple. It has 3 main sections. The main page, each project has a specific page with the description and analysis, and also the methodology page where I am telling how do I create this archive. So the main idea, I create this archive for 3 main reasons. First of all, it's because I realized that this was something important to share in my field, or at least with the people that I am in touch. Data visualization for activism is not something very strongly clear. Like many activists don't know that they can work with designers for doing communication and counter-information in this way. So the archive was a way of putting together different actors for making them start talking, designers with activists. In another way, I realized that many of these projects, since they are online, and you know that many projects in the internet are obsolete because they happened many years ago and there are not technologies that can support them anymore. So I did this archive for preserving some of these projects that are part of the historical memory of activism. The archive also, the way in which I structure is really trying to follow the data feminism approach, let's say, in terms that I didn't want to just collect cases. I wanted also to provide a description of them for making sense of how these projects were made in order to share that knowledge to someone that wants to replicate them or wants to know more. So the archive answers to who are the people behind the project and their motivations, what are the sources of data and how they are shared, and also what are the aesthetic practices that they use for engaging with audiences. So as a result, I find out all the different topics and the different organizations that are all actually working on this type of communication for activism. And also I found something that was, when I realized about this, I say how it is possible. I find out that many of these projects, even if they have the same motivation of sharing, opening, disrupting, going not against, but trying to liberate data, many of these projects actually were very far away of what is the open source ethos. They didn't include a methodological section, they didn't include the data sources, or they didn't share the way or the tools or the different material that they use for. So then I realized that this incoherence was related to the fact that even if there are projects that are having a relevant role in activism, that makes me think that we should start using data visualization for activism with a different approach. So that's why the main ideas that I want to present you today as well is that data visualization for activism needs another approach. Visualizations need to be disclosed. Visualizations can't be anymore just a aesthetically pleasant representation of something. They should be open in ways in which someone else can see how the visualization was created and inquire and question how that visualization and its interpretation of the conflict is correct or not. And the second idea is to think about data visualization, again, not just as a finished output, but I like to prefer to think on data visualization as an open toolbox that is possible to reuse and to modify it. And this is very closely to the idea of the open source and hacker ethos. So what I'm trying to share every time I can, as today, is this idea of whenever you're working with data visualization for activism, especially, we should disclose this. We should disclose the way in which visualizations have been made in order to share the way in which designers are creating interpretations of those conflicts. Remember, there are interpretations that are full of bias, because we are human beings and we have many bias in every decision that we are doing. So exposing those decisions is not a way of, let's say, opening possible criticalities of my work, but I am opening the way in which I create a visualization in order to the non-expert, the reader, can interpret the visualization and think about its construction. In this way, promoting and perpetuating the inquiry of the conflict. So a good case that I want to show you is this one. It's a project that was done by Off Topic Collective in 2016. And it's a project that is talking about, is trying to provide counter-information related to a huge project that was going to happen in the city of Milan. Finally, it didn't happen. But in the moment we wanted to share counter-information related to this project, we built a storytelling data-driven project that is still online. And during this project, you can see on the screen on the right, this is the main cover of one of the chapters of it. We also create a separate section that is called the metadata section, in which we exposed every decision and every step for doing this visualization. The idea, you can see, this is like the whole page, that in this metadata section, we expose the tools, the methods, the decisions, very aware about our own bias, because as a political collective, we have a very strong statement and we are not neglecting it. Actually, we want to expose it. In this way, the project shares not only how it was done, but it also shared the possibilities to someone else to take it, download every file, every dataset, every material that we used is already published, in order to someone else, if you want, you can redo, you can change, you can critique, or you can replicate the same method for doing other visualizations in other contexts. And I'm very glad to say that this the disclosure of data visualization projects is something that we are also doing at Politecnico di Milano with our students. This is a project of former students of the previous course that we did last year, and it's a project related to analyzing the comments on petitions on the change.org platform. So students did a big analysis, very complicated, very complex, but by exposing how they did the project, they are not only sharing and opening the way in which the project was built that you can take and reuse, but they are also making people being closer to data. So it's a way also for approaching data literacy. And this is also not a trend, but this is part of the project of the anti-eviction mapping project in San Francisco, which they recently not only share the data visualizations that they are using and creating for telling about evictions in San Francisco, they created this directory, let's say, which is a database in which they are sharing all of the information related to landlords and evictions in San Francisco in order to push people to think about data and to create, to reinvent new ways of analyzing and creating alternative narratives about what is happening in San Francisco Bay Area. So finally, the second thing is, again, I want to push the idea that data visualization for activism, it's more like a toolbox that is open and is incomplete, instead of thinking on data visualization as aesthetically pleasant images that sensibilize people. So I have nothing against images that are strongly persuade and sensibilize people. That's something that must be done. But at the same time, let's think on data visualization for data activism as something that is being active. So in this way, thinking on toolbox, I want to tell you about this experience. I have the chance to work with people in Mexico that are related to research around enforced disappearance of people. So I have the very difficult task to design workshops for teaching journalists, familiars of people that were missing, activists and other people that are working on this research to teach them about data visualization. It was a hard task since there were many different levels of technological knowledge, different working tools. There was a strong space of intimate stories. So I just want to tell you this because working with this organization on teaching about data visualization was a huge challenge, but at the same time, I could collect the reflections and the main ideas of the participants that actually were very grateful because visualization was not only a tool for visualizing their data, very messy data, but also it was a way for making them feeling safer on working with sensible data. Also, it was a way of making them to start collaborating. Many people are looking for their familiars in very independent ways, not coordinated, but through data visualization and working with data, they realize that they can start collaborating. And finally, these are some of the testimonies of this workshop experience. I want to highlight that in this case, data visualization, again, is not the final output, but it's also the process. And as a process, it's a toolbox that is incomplete, it's unfinished, but it can really bring data to work in an active manner for activism. So just to end, I want to finish with this quotation of Paulo Freire, which was an educator and philosopher from Brazil. I strongly believe that the distribution of information is where we can change everything. So by opening visualizations, by starting being critical also about other data visualization is where we can start contesting and continue inquiring about conflicts and understanding them in a more appropriating about the information. So thank you very much.
I would like to ask you one question. So when we work on data visualizations, something that we often have to think about is who is the main target audience for our products. And I agree that a big part of data visualization is the process itself, because the researcher may find many interesting things in the process. But I was wondering, for example, for the last possible visualizations that you mentioned about forced disappearance, who would be this targeted to? To people who are affected by this problem, or to people who are not even aware about this problem? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, of course. In the case of enforced disappearance, it's actually very critical because even if it's a phenomenon that is well known in Mexico, for instance, there's no evidence because it's very dirty or it's very hidden by authorities. So it's not for bringing a new conversation, it's for bringing the facts, the arguments, for talking in the same level with the authorities that are denying everything. So also in the case of data visualization and enforced disappearance, the people that are already working very hard around this topic, they know that it's very relevant to still engage with society. So this should not be kept as a problem or a conflict that is only related to the familiars or the people around missing people. It's a national problem, so they are very aware that they need to still communicate and engage to the society. So trying to answer to your question, data visualization is a tool for the collaboration and the research process, is also a tool for engaging with the audiences, and is also a tool for bringing arguments to go into trial against the authorities.